It's Friday, July 26th. Let's talk PlayStation. So you know how it is. We'll start off with that PlayStation Plus reminder. For the month of July, it is Horizon Chase Turbo and Detroit Become Human. You got like a week left and some change if you want these games, so you better download them quick or add them to your library because Sony will be swapping these out soon. Now, we got some firmware to talk about, and you guys know I get super jazzed up about firmware because it's so exciting. But the Vita's not that great. So basically we got firmware 3.71. It's nothing crazy. Sony's just covering up an exploit that was discovered in 3.70, which there was a jailbreak that's been floating around for Vita, so that's why that was covered up. Vita's outside of manufacturing. Sony's not going to give us new features or anything, but they want to make sure that piracy is pretty much to the curb. So 3.71 for Vita available now. PS4, however, a bit of a different story. We've got firmware 7.0 beta floating out there. So if you're in the beta program for PlayStation 4 and you've been a part of it in the past, you probably have an email waiting for you about being part of 7.0. Now, if you remember, back in May, we had PS4 Beta Firmware 6.80, and the main headlining feature there was the party chat going from 8 to 16 players. That's still very much part of 7.0, but it looks like Sony's rounded up to a whole number and added a few extra features in there as well. So we do have 8 players to 16 on the party chat. We've got chat transcripts for the PS4 second screen app on iOS and Android, so you can get party chat converted to text. I have to imagine that doesn't work that well, but you know, that's a thing. And then you've got text being turned into a voiceover. So a lot of accessibility options for voice chat, so that's fine. The patch notes say that network connectivity has been improved. Quality of voice chat has been improved as well. That was, I believe, also part of 6.0. But the extra feature not in the patch notes is if you go to the PS4 settings, there is now an option for HDR. So this is a system-wide control of the HDR feature. We know a lot of games have high dynamic range. Usually, most games, they just have an on-off feature with HDR, and you can kind of, you know, maybe do a visual slider to change it how you want. But this is a system-wide feature now to where you can adjust it based on your television set, because obviously every television is different. Now, I believe this is what they did with 6.80. However, we got Melissa coming in hot here. On 7.0, if you get a beta invite code, it can actually be shared up to 20 times. So one code is good to send out to a bunch of friends. Now, Sony's doing this and encouraging this because if you are in 7.0, you can't party chat with people that are still on the previous firmware 6.72. So it's very crucial that if you want to keep using party chat, you got to send that code out to a bunch of your friends, make sure that they're on the same firmware, and then you can party chat with them as well. And there's actually some asterisks on a person's name in your friends list or in the party chat if you can't access that chat because those particular users are in a previous firmware. Now, over on Twitter, we got some kind people that wanted to share their codes because they don't have a way to share the remaining portions of their code. So if you want to join in on the 7.0 beta, I am displaying them right now, so shout out to those guys over on Twitter, some very kind folks over there. And another feature of 7.0 is going to change how we do our stability updates forever. That's right, every time we get a little incremental update on PlayStation 4 where it's, you know, slight system improvement, software stability, and you know, we've joked about this over the years, and it has been widely mocked on the internet about how our PlayStations are so stable. Looks like we won't have to restart our PS4 anymore when we get those updates. So it was a minor inconvenience, certainly. I didn't think it was a big deal. However, when we get those updates moving past 7.0, you won't have to reboot the system anymore. Now, keep in mind, if it's a major update, I mean, you're still going to have to reboot the damn thing. It happens everywhere, desktops, phones. I mean, it's going to have to reboot if it really dramatically changes the OS. But that small stuff now, just gonna download, install, and you're good to go. Just jump right into your applications, no problem. Which, you know, not bad. You can take that one to the bank. So it's also been revealed for this past week that for EVO 2019, PlayStation is an official sponsor. And it's easy to see why, given that 8 of the 9 games there are being played on PlayStation 4s, the one oddball out being Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. And, you know, Sony's not really a stranger to the fighting game community. I mean, they've been there before. I mean, they've done events. They have Street Fighter V console exclusivity for this whole generation. I mean, that's why they're not really... It's not like they don't know what's going on here. And so that, I guess this is notable because, you know, people are probably expecting announcements of some sort. Because EVO has kind of been a place in recent years to see announcements. Not anything major, but, I mean, well, I guess that's relative to what you think is major. You know, I wouldn't expect E3 level announcements, but, you know, we are seeing some things come out of EVO recently that are certainly significant to people in the fighting game community. Now, I'm not too into that scene, so I guess I can't really completely speak on the topic. I wouldn't expect anything major out of it, but again, it's relative. So if you're into fighting games, you might want to keep your eyes peeled on the event for sure, which you probably already will. Now, moving on to our next news story, I feel like this one's going to be pretty long, but I think it's very important, so we're definitely going to talk about this, but if you're not interested, then just skip ahead. So at Naughty Dog, there's a recent report coming out of COG Connected that some ex-Naughty Dog employees were talking about crunch at the company. Crunch, of course, if you don't know, being a portion of a game's development, or perhaps all of a game's development, where you're just trying to hit your deadline, and so you're possibly pressured by management to work longer hours beyond the 40-hour work week. You feel as though your job's at stake, you're not being treated fairly, or it's harsh conditions. And the thing about crunch and the software industry is that it's very much so a real thing. It comes out from different avenues, not just in video games, but again, other software companies as well. It does happen. I feel like it's pretty ignorant to say that it doesn't. It's just a matter of what should and shouldn't be held accountable. But so we've got a number of quotes coming out of this article that we're going to go over, and we'll discuss at greater lengths about the topic at hand. So this is some of the interesting notes that came out of this article. And remember, these are ex-Naughty Dog employees that are speaking on the terms of being anonymous. So my take on crunch at Naughty Dog. The truth is more gray than black and white. Here is no official mandate for crunch. There can be a significant amount of peer pressure, though. And that can include peer pressure from the people who are effectively your managers. Peer pressure comes from having a team of brilliant, talented, dedicated people working hard on a project together. The truth is they don't tell you that you have to work X amount of hours, but you have to get your work done. And the amount of work is just impossible for any person. It is just way too much. And if you don't hit the goals, you will be fired. So I guess you don't have much of a choice. Also, we were paid barely above minimum wage. So again, management used the notion of making overtime pay to keep us longer. During crunch time, which lasted many months, we could be working anywhere from 60 to 80-hour work weeks on average. I remember hitting 100 plus hours on the final week of development of The Last of Us. A normal work week for us was 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., 6 days a week, and we didn't really have any choice about it. Sometimes we'd stay until midnight or 1 a.m. At the end of Uncharted 4, we started doing 7-day work weeks for a little while, and even did some 24-hour shifts where we'd come in at 10 a.m. and leave 10 a.m. the next day. I didn't really have a life outside of work for 8 to 9 months during the big crunch. A few people would leave at 7 every day instead of staying late, but it was usually because of medical reasons. We also had to consider that it was less likely for us to be kept on at the end of the project if we didn't work as hard as the rest of the team. There was a yoga session that was held around once a week that the developers could attend. I remember a coworker asking if QA could do the yoga too, but our managers told us no. They rarely provided dinner for OT and crunch. I believe we only got dinner if the developers stayed. Even then, I think we only got to grab food after the developers got theirs. There was an email that got sent out to the company that invited everyone to go out and have fun, but stated outright that contractors weren't allowed to join. Many of us feel like we weren't really part of the company. We worked our asses off only to be treated as if we didn't belong. It sucked. That, coupled with the amount of OT and crunch we worked, really wore us down. I lived at home during my time at Naughty Dog, and I could go a week without seeing my parents. Now, as I mentioned prior to the quotes, this is very much a thing that happens, right? I don't think it's a matter of, is this true, but to the effect of how much of it is true. Because that's the difference that I think a lot of us need to separate here when it comes to discussing something like crunch and this particular industry, is that it definitely happens, but it happens for a different type of reason. Whereas if you take a situation of, let's say, a standard factory worker, which is a 9-to-5 job, benefits and whatnot, if you're a full-time employee, but that's an industry, or any industry, right, where you don't necessarily care about that work. Let's say you're on the line making umbrellas or mass manufacturing a car or something. Now, you might not be very passionate about that. In fact, you may not care at all about it, and it may just be a job that pays the bills, gives you health benefits and whatnot, and there's really no drive or again, passion to really, go above and beyond for something like that. It's a job, right? And it's going to pay your bills, and that's fine. Now, certainly you could put in the extra work, chase some promotions, again, at a factory level job or something. But, 9 times out of 10, most people aren't going to be very happy in a place like that. And it's certainly probably not the kind of place where you choose to fall into, right? You do it because you need money, and it's, again, a standard job. Something like games and anything in the tech industry, you go out of your way to do it, right? You go to school for it. It's a field where you enjoy the work, you enjoy what you're doing, and at the end of the day, no matter how much you enjoy your job, it's going to feel like work, and that's the thing about crunch. But it is the field where, you get into it purposely, you finally get your dream job, you're at an entry-level programming position. You are going to put in extra work if you're just starting out. If you want to, get promoted, if you want to, chase the corporate ladder within that developer or publisher, or take on a new role, take on more responsibilities. That's what these people want to do, and it's almost one of those things where, as discouraging as it is, you have to do that, because if you're not doing it, the guy next to you is going to. You know what I mean? Yes, there's no mandate, and I certainly believe that at Naughty Dog there's probably no mandate for crunch. But to act like there's no pressure from a manager to say, we need to get this game shipped, if anybody could stay later, who's going to stay? And you've got 1 or 2 volunteers, and you've got 3 other people in a particular department. Sure enough, if you're the one guy that's going home, you're probably not going to be considered for that promotion. You're probably not going to be considered Again, it goes into a personal aspect, maybe personal outings, which is kind of what they're referring to. Now that's going into more of a different sense of actual full-time employees versus contractors, and I don't really know if we could even speak on that, because again, we don't know if that's true. These guys are speaking on the anonymous aspect, so there's certainly some due diligence about if that is or is not true, but I'm just trying to cover this in the most broad sense, where it's like, this stuff definitely takes place, but let's really discuss what can maybe be done about it, which I certainly wouldn't know. But to act like these things don't happen is crazy, because that's what happens in that kind of work environment, where people are going to willingly work longer hours, and you may not be totally happy with that, but if you don't, I mean, you are seen as a lesser employee, you are seen as somebody that's not working as harder as the next guy, and that's the kind of pressure that I think is there. Certainly I think you can make a case for, yeah, if you aren't putting in enough amount of work, maybe you could get fired, that could be a punishable offense, and to that I say that's absolutely ridiculous and that's inexcusable. But because of the stigma to work a lot and prove your worth to the company, to, let's say you are still QA, or you are still an entry-level position, or you're a contract worker, you do put in that work because you either don't want to get laid off at the end of the project, or you do want to be made full-time, you want to, again, get promoted. It's just a reality of it, right? It's a fight or flight thing. And so how do you fight that kind of environment? It's tough, certainly, because you are going to have these guys that are going to go above and beyond. And you are going to have an employee that's not going to feel as though they're as secure in their job because they choose to live a healthier lifestyle by not overworking themselves and going home and having a higher quality of life. It is sad that kind of mentality could possibly punish you long term, because you're just not seen as the kind of guy that's as committed to the company as some of these other people. To me, I think that's what a lot of this really derives from, is that survival of the fittest aspect. And then you've got, two ends of the spectrum, where on the far end, you've got a terrible work environment where it is mandated to stay there longer, and you will lose your job if you don't do what you're told, and you don't stay for as long as you have to, and you're not compensated for your work, and you're expected to work for free, and that's absolutely terrible. And then, again, tipping the scale and going on the other side of it, you have a situation where it's actually a very lax environment, and you're not actually in any way, shape, or form required to stay, and most workers actually do leave on time, and the crunch aspect of development isn't really there, and most workers are happy, and there's no favoritism in place. But that's what I think we're kind of looking at here, because it is a broad spectrum, right? There is two ends to it. I don't know where Naughty Dog falls. I'd have to imagine they're kind of in the range of what I'm discussing, which is that you just have a lot of people that are super committed to the work, especially a developer like Naughty Dog. It's a very high caliber studio. If you are a developer working at that studio, I feel as though you definitely are going to want to prove your worth. They've got such a big reputation in this industry now. They're Sony's breadwinner. They're releasing these high caliber games that are coveted and loved, world renowned. I can see how that is a real reality there. And that doesn't excuse it. Even if it's Naughty Dog, that doesn't make it okay. But I think that's what's really at play here. And again, you've got that spectrum. But I would love to see an alternate timeline with a lot of these big games, these AAA titles with, a lot of those heavy rumors regarding their crunch time and their horror stories, the big usual suspects, the latest Grand Theft Auto, Witcher, anything out of Bethesda. Wherever we hear crunch, I'd love to see these games get re-released again in another universe where you told every employee you go when you're supposed to. You do your standard 8 hours, maybe 9 or 10 hours, some leeway with a little bit of overtime, but most people leave when they're supposed to, because that's just a proper work environment. You treat everybody the same. Reward people for their actual work ethic and their leadership skills and things like that, rather than just how much time they're spending at the company. And that's in the scenario of people feeling pressured to stay there because of the possibility of being fired or climbing the corporate ladder. Because again, that's where a lot of it comes from. And yeah, there is that management pressure as well. But again, get rid of all that. Then how do these games release? Do they really take that much longer to come out? Really? I don't know. I would have to reckon that these games would still come out just fine if you give people the appropriate amount of time. Now, you're still going to have people that are very passionate and they want to work longer hours. But again, you just tell people, look, you got to go home. You can't be doing this to yourself, right? But that's just the way that this field can be sometimes with people that are really into their work. So I don't really know how to leave this conversation, and I still don't feel as though we really covered every avenue of this. There's also unionizing. We didn't even really get into that beast, which is an entirely separate thing. We could do a whole separate topic on that. But this happens, right? Whether this particular article was complete bullshit or not, these things happen in the industry. It is an issue. There's no easy way to solve it just because of the kind of interpersonal complications of it, where it all stems from. But their work shows, and I wish nothing better for these people than a great lifestyle where they can work and not feel any pressure and have this clear state of mind where they don't have to worry about being fired, and they're paid accordingly, and they live a great quality of life. Anyway, getting into our next news story, Media Molecule has a new job listing for their content creation team, and going through it and reading it, it's pretty interesting. It almost sounds as though you don't necessarily have to be a developer to land the job, so they're actually looking for all walks of life that can present some work to Media Molecule, whether you're a small independent developer just out of school, but certainly you do have to have content creation already made in dreams to demonstrate what you're capable of. So it almost appears as though you could be, say, just a content creator in dreams that is producing some very engaging content. You could possibly actually land some work. Now, it's a contract job. Again, how I'm reading it, it seems as though this is actually single-player content for Dreams, which, it's currently in early access. It's just creation tools and playing other people's creations, but, we're still waiting for an actual retail full release of this game where it's outside of early access and it comes with this possible story mode and, single-player levels that you can run through. And, Media Molecule has also been open about possibly monetizing, letting people in the community monetize their creations, because really, when you do look at the stuff being made in Dreams, it's full-blown standing on its own. And I hate using remakes so much as a example, but it's the easiest way to kind of demonstrate what you can do in this game. I really wish original content would be highlighted more, but again, it's hard to demonstrate what you can do in the game. When you take something familiar like Crash Bandicoot or Metal Gear Solid or Death Stranding and recreate it in Dreams, then you can get an idea of like, oh my god, I can't tell the difference between these two, because that's what you can do in Dreams. I mean, you can, if you're good at the sculpting aspect of this game with the Move controllers or the DualShock 4, I mean, you're making full-blown character models, and that's how crazy and in-depth these tools are getting, to the point where not only are you creating these full assets that look nothing like anything else in Dreams, but you've got all these mechanics in place where you can build a platformer, a racing game, what have you, and it's far beyond what you can do in Little Big Planet. This is what I've been describing for a while, is that in Little Big Planet, if you play any of the community levels, I mean, you can tell right away usually what the creator used to make their creation, right? You can tell that sponge material, you can tell that there's sockets here and wrenches there, and there's a pulley system here, and this is a logic board, but like a lot of the times when you're going through Dreams, you might not necessarily know how they made that particular thing, you know what I mean? Like, that's kind of how I've always seen it. And so this looks like this is like a real situation where if you're not a developer, maybe you could land a job there if you're really good with their tools and you make some really profound things in Dreams. So moving on, this past week, Hideo Kojima showed us the box art for Death Stranding, so you can see the standard edition right here, and then they showed us the collector's edition, or the steelbook, I should say. Looks fine. In fact, I thought it looked good, but surprisingly, a lot of people are like not really happy with this box art, and they're pretty pissed off that it wasn't more creative or more artistically driven, because it's it's a Kojima game, so I guess he's just got this expectation to do something that's a little different and outside the norm. And I guess I could see where people are coming from, especially given the nature of this game, which is that we don't know what the hell's going on still. I mean, we know a lot more about it than we did, say, 6 months ago, so I'll give some credit there. But there's still this aura around the game where it's like it's dark and dreary and it's confusing, and so I guess people are upset that it's just the protagonist's face, and that's it, right? I've never seen so many people this upset about box art before, and that's coming from a guy who opened up 100 PS3 games on camera and bitched and moaned about cases and manuals for upwards of like 18 minutes. So I'm fine with it though. I think it looks fine. I mean, I think a lot of people are still going to buy the game and not have a problem with it at the end of the day. Now let's get into Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway. One of you can win a $10 PSN code, and I'd like to congratulate Thea Playa Z. You have won this week's code. I'll be contacting you very soon via Twitter. If you would like to win a $10 PSN code, it's so simple. Follow the link down below to the Gleam website. Supporting this channel, a number of ways can gain you an entry, and we do this every single week on Let's Talk PlayStation. Let me pay for your games. Those are all the news stories I want to talk about, you guys. And so this past week, we did 3 videos. This one being Let's Talk PlayStation, but Monday and Wednesday we had one as well. So we looked at the PS3 from the Condor cluster from the US Air Force. Monday we unboxed it. Wednesday we did a deep dive into the firmware of the unit and talked about sort of the history of PS3 firmwares. And a lot of you really enjoyed that, which is great. We'll definitely try and get more PlayStation products out of Sony's history to do some videos on. But admittedly, this kind of got me thinking. I've got so many projects that I'm working on and so many video ideas that I've written down that if we were to knock them out once a week, I mean, it would take us like 3/4 of a year to get all these out. And obviously I'd be making more ideas and brainstorming within that 3/4 of a year. So honestly, I think we should try and do another Monday, Wednesday thing for a little bit and see how we go there, especially given that there's not a whole lot going on with PlayStation right now. You know, they're in this weird spot where their developers are working on the final PS4 games and then PS5 projects, which we won't hear about until Sony talks about PS5, which won't be for a little while as well. So, you know, we can only talk about PS5 rumors so many times. They're far and few between, so I think this is a great time to actually cover some more interesting topics that I'm working on, and I'm very much so working on some documentaries as well. I know you guys really enjoy those. I'm working on the next one right now because the PSP one came out late May, so you know, my break's over for that long researchy type video. I want to get into another idea, and I think this one's going to be pretty cool as well that's coming up. But there's a lot of stuff coming up, and so I think we should just maybe do Monday, Wednesday. But by all means, it's a conversation, so let me know if you'd be interested in something like that. Follow on Twitter at Mystic Ryan to keep up with all the updates and news and whatnot. If anything major happens with PlayStation, you know, usually we'll just do a video right away anyway. If it's a major piece of news, we won't wait till Friday. So, but again, Twitter's like the best place to stay up to date with where I'm going to be in terms of uploading these videos. And sometimes on the rare occasion we'll do a Q&A with major topics as well, so just throwing that out there. That's why Twitter is a good place to reach me, and we can talk about stuff there. But I've had a few people ask, you know, can we do 3 videos a week? And I've had no problem with that. I've just in recent months focused more on quality instead of quantity, but luckily I've run into some more free time, which is great. But I love making videos, and so I think we can actually do that now where we don't necessarily lose the quality aspect of it. So we'll do that for a little bit and let me know what you think. Anyway, though, that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan, but I can thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.